There is a famous cartoon, some of you may be familiar with it. A person is standing at a podium and they ask, "Who wants change?" And everyone in the crowd raises their hand. And then the person continues, "Who wants to change?" And very quickly, the hands go down. That pretty much summarizes the entirety of Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Numbers that we begin this week, which is not an excuse not to come back for the next several weeks. There's plenty more to be added to that, but that is pretty much the encapsulation of it. It's a book of failures and of failing expectations, and all of it is really rooted in the Israelites' desire for there to be change without any accompanying need for them to change themselves. And it's not that they haven't done work. They have. In the book of Exodus and Leviticus, they've arranged an entirely new society. They've received laws and commandments that will order that society. They've established leaders and judges and a system for orderly living. They've done so much work. But it comes to very little because they've shirked the harder job, the hardest job of all, changing themselves, changing their conditioned responses to the world around them. All throughout this book of Torah, they will continue bad habits learned throughout generations of servitude, and these habits will lead to setback after setback. It seems you can take the slave out of Egypt, but you can't take Egypt out of the slave. So what are these bad habits? According to one modern commentator, slavery has hardwired the Israelites to face the world with one of two reactions: never or immediately. And both of these are destructive mindsets that impede our ability to change and to face change. And as a community who we might argue is facing a rapidly changing world, it behooves us to examine these responses and to determine where we might see them in ourselves. Now, never is the mindset of despair. Never is the slave's posture that is meant to protect them from the heartbreak that exists all around them. Right? A slave might say, "Well, when do I allow myself to hope, to dream, to pray that something might change and be different?" Well, the answer is never. Never. And that way I can safeguard my heart from disappointment. So after generations of slavery, we can understand why Israel has adopted this protective posture, even as we recognize the way that it will impede their ability to face change. It will hamstring the Israelites in the wilderness. This mindset of never is the position of the scouts who report back that they cannot take the land and shouldn't go into Israel, even though it is what God commands. This is what is in the heads of those who will say over and over in the Israelite camp as they wander through this wilderness that it would be better had they been in Egypt than free right now, because nothing will improve. And if we are honest, most of us have at some point chosen this mindset. We've said that it was impossible for things to get better. We've lived in the past rather than face an uncertain future. We've told ourselves that we couldn't change, that we couldn't overcome. And yet we know what's possible when we're able to shift our way of thinking away from never. But the second reaction is just as damaging. Immediately. Immediately is the mindset that is instilled by Pharaoh in order to keep a slave going. When will you be fed? Immediately. Will it be nourishing? No, but you will be satiated. When will you receive a new shirt, a new cloak, new shoes? Immediately. Will they be exactly what you need? No, but they'll be suitable You'll have just enough. And this creates a fixation amongst the Israelites on quick fixes. And this is what makes them susceptible to the voices of Korach and the voices of the Midianites, who will say, you know, there is an easier and more gratifying path than the one upon which Moses is leading you. But nowhere is this mindset more on display than when on the outskirts of the Promised Land, right outside, the tribes of Reuben and Gad and Manasseh will demand to inhabit the grasslands of Gilead rather than enter Israel. They're ready to settle for what is easy and immediate rather than their blessed birthright. But we can appreciate this response as well. Surely there have been times when we've reached for the quick fix rather than put in the real work. And how often those quick fixes have failed us. What would be possible if we could shift our thinking away from immediately? The book of Numbers is a testament to the thesis that in order to create change or face change, we must be ready to change ourselves. And yet Torah is not so optimistic about our ability to do this. After all, God and Moses and Aaron and Miriam and the elders, in fact, would rather wait for an entire generation to die than to lead them to actually change their behaviors and way of thinking. It's not exactly the kind of leadership strategy you're going to read about in the Harvard Business Review or hear a TED Talk about. But I think it points to the fact that the work of leading people through change is hard, which leads us back to the original cartoon and its final frame. Who wants change? Good. Who wants to change? Hands go down. And then finally, who wants to lead change? And everybody runs out of the room as fast as they can. It's not easy to be a leader, but it is especially difficult to lead during times of upheaval and uncertainty. And the book of Numbers is nothing if not a litany of leadership challenges in just such moments. And I think there is no doubt about it. We ourselves are living through a moment of great change. And because in my spare time I enjoy reading old sermons, yes, I do, I can tell you that it is true, every generation does say that about themselves. We're living through great change, but it's also true that the extent of that change varies. And I think we're on solid ground to say this is quite a moment. To face the breakneck speed of transformation before the Jewish community, we need to avoid responding with never, because the changes are happening whether we want them to or not. And we will also need to avoid the seduction of quick fixes to what are, in many cases, overwhelming problems and challenges. Anyone who tells us they have an immediate solve is automatically suspect. World events are demanding more of us, and we will have to find responses somewhere between immediately and never. But our synagogue, time and time again, rises to the occasion. And this is in no small part due to the extraordinary lay leaders who devote their time and energy and resources and care to this community and through us to the wider community around us. Tonight, in just a few moments, we will install our officers and trustees of the board, voted upon by this congregation at our annual meeting. It's a moment to honor the exceptional leadership who steps up and is stepping up to serve us in this very moment. Each of them is an admired and respected member of our community who does tremendous service to this congregation and beyond its walls. They carry extraordinary gifts that they tirelessly bring to bear for all of us, And so on behalf of all of us and with all of us, we will honor and install and bless them tonight. I'll ask them to come up as I call their names. First, our President, John May, taking his place for his first year of service. John is a long-time member of this congregation, an ardent believer in the transformative power of Reform Judaism, and has already devoted quite a few years of service to our congregation as trustee and as a member of our executive committee and as our treasurer. We are so very lucky to have you leading us for the next several years ahead. I'll also call up our officers, our treasurer, David Tanner, our secretary, Josh Targoff, our vice presidents, Jonathan Crystal, Amy Glickman, Sarah Moss, and Susie Stern, and members of our board of trustees, Phil Burney, Janine Bernstein, Nancy Shemtab, Devonna Cohn, Richard Cohn, Cindy Edelson, Bruce Gutkin, Alan Herman, David Kleinhandler, Ben Lowski, Jocelyn Markowitz, Lisa Messenger, Lori Moore, Ellen Oppenheim, Karen Piquet, Julie Rice, Susan Saltstein, Jill Siegerman, Jenny Sharfstein-Kane, Jeffrey Silverstein, Mark Stern, David Weil, and Jackie Weiss, and our former presidents, David Edelson, Jeremy Fielding, Kenneth Heitner, Abby Progerman, Howard Sharfstein, Shawnee Silverberg, and Alfred Youngwood. This is the right spot. It's a privilege to be able to mark this moment with all of you, to be able to thank you for what you've given and what you will give, to note the incredible wisdom, integrity, decency, compassion, intelligence, and, thank goodness, patience that you give through your leadership. Thank you. We could not be an iota of what we are without the dedication and without the best of our lay leadership. So on behalf of all of the clergy and the staff in this congregation, we are going to offer a blessing up upon you in this moment. Cantor Pearsall is going to teach us the refrain so that all of us can be part of this blessing. This is a congregational moment, and we'll add our voices to bless this incredible group of leaders for the year ahead.